Usually when we sit down to do one of these conversations, we're trying to uh, predict where the culture is going. We look at trends, we look at tech.
We're looking forward.
We're always looking forward.
Yeah.
But today, I want to do something a little different. I want to look back. I want to look at a crater,
A crater. That's an interesting way to put it.
a cultural crater,
Yeah.
an impact site. We're talking about something that hit the atmosphere a few years back, and honestly, I think we're all still breathing in the dust.
I have a feeling I know what impact you're talking about.
But before we get to the heavy sociology and looking at the absolute stack of notes you brought with you, it is definitely going to get heavy. I stumbled across something in some old search logs that I just have to share.
Oh, yeah.
It's a kind of semantic slip-up that I think perfectly frames what we're talking about today.
I think I know which one this is. Does it involve swapping a vowel?
It absolutely does. It's the great squid versus squad confusion of 2021.
The unintended collision.
Yeah.
Yes, a beautiful, chaotic moment.
It's incredible. So picture the scene, right? You have millions of people hearing about this new Korean phenomenon, Squid Game.
Right. It's exploding on Netflix. Everyone's talking about it.
And at the same time, you have this very serious, very tactical first-person shooter video game called Squad.
Mm-hmm. A game that's all about teamwork and military precision.
Exactly. And for a solid few months, the search algorithms, Google, they just didn't know what to do with people. They were having a meltdown.
It's such a fascinating mix-up because, on the surface, they could not be more different things.
Not at all.
Like I said, Squad is a military simulation. It's all about communication, chain of command, keeping your unit alive in a war zone. If you run off alone in Squad, you die. Period.
And then you have the show, which ironically also creates a squad.
It does.
Sang Gi-hoon, Sang-woo, the old man, Ali,
Yeah.
Semyok. It builds this team.
But it builds that team specifically to dismantle it, to tear it apart from the inside out.
That's it. The show is basically an anti-squad simulator.
It is. It forces these desperate people to build connections, to form bonds, to rely on each other, just so it can twist the knife when the system demands that only one person can survive.
It builds the team only to destroy it under the crushing weight of capitalism.
Precisely. The game itself is the enemy of the squad.
So just to be crystal clear for anyone tuning in who might still be confused, today we are not talking about military tactics or flanking maneuvers.
No.
We are talking about the show that turned green tracksuits into high fashion and made the entire world absolutely terrified of a simple game called Red Light, Green Light. We are doing the definitive retrospective on Squid Game.
And looking back at it now from our vantage point here in 2026, it's almost hard to remember just how unlikely this whole thing was.
Right. It feels inevitable now.
It feels inevitable, a $900 million empire. But for a very, very long time, this was a dead script, a story nobody wanted.
That's the part that just blows my mind. The sheer scale of the success versus the humility, the origin. I really want to zoom in on that origin story for a second. Let's go back to 2009.
A rough year for the global economy. The financial crisis was in full swing.
Exactly. And picture the creator, dong-hyuk. He isn't a global showrunner yet. He's not doing press tours in LA. He is living with his mother and his grandmother.
He's not just between jobs. He's in serious financial trouble.
Total economic ruin, which puts the themes of the show into such sharp perspective, doesn't it? He wasn't just imagining what it felt like to be desperate for money.
He was living it, the anxiety, the pressure.
Yeah.
That was his daily reality.
And there's this one detail from the biography that it stays with me. He's writing this script, this masterpiece about debt and desperation, and he hits a point where he physically cannot afford to keep going. He has to sell his laptop.
For $675.
$675. That number is so specific and so heartbreaking. He had to liquidate the very tool he was using to create his future just to pay rent, to buy food.
The irony is it's tragic. He's writing about characters who are literally selling their bodies and their morality for cash, and he's forced to sell his own creative capacity for a few $100 to survive.
And if you just fast forward from that $675 laptop to the release, what do you get?
You get a show that hit #1 in 94 countries. You get 1.65 billion viewing hours in the first 28 days alone.
It's the biggest show in Netflix history, and it came from a guy who had to sell his computer for less than $1,000.
It creates this incredible, powerful tension between the reality of the creator and the fiction he built. The poverty wasn't a set dressing, it was the atmosphere he was breathing.
So here's the mission for our conversation today. We are going to unpack how a script that was rejected for a decade for being too grotesque and too unrealistic ended up becoming a universal language for the entire world.
We're going to look at the real history, the blood and the DNA of the show, as I like to call it.
I love that phrase.
Yeah.
And we're going to break down the psychological warfare of the set design, the sound design, all of it.
And since we are recording this in early 2026, we have the benefit of hindsight. We can look at the complete arc. Season 1, the revenge tour of Season 2 that dropped in December 2024.
And of course, the final chapter, Season 3, from June of 2025. We've seen how it all ends.
You can see the whole picture.
So let's start with the struggle. Because there is this popular narrative online, you see it in tweets, you see it on Reddit all the time, that Hwang wrote Squid Game for 10 years straight.
Right, the tortured genius narrative.
Yeah, like he was hunched over that one laptop for a decade, just refining dialogue and tweaking scenes.
Well, we love that story, don't we? We love the idea that if you just grind on one thing for 10 years, eventually you'll win. It's a very appealing myth.
But the reality is a bit more complicated and honestly a bit more depressing.
It is.
So correct the record for us. What was actually happening during that decade?
It wasn't 10 years of continuous writing. Not at all. It was 10 years of shelving.
Shelving.
He conceived the idea in 2009, right in the teeth of that financial crisis, as we mentioned. But then, for all intents and purposes, he put it away.
Because nobody wanted it.
Nobody. He took it to studios. He took it to investors. He even pitched it to potential actors. And the feedback loop was just brutal.
What were they saying?
The notes were pretty consistent. They told him it was too violent. They told him the concept was too bizarre and complex. And my personal favorite rejection note, they told him it just wasn't commercial enough.
Which is, that's just hilarious in hindsight, isn't it? Considering it became the single most commercial property Netflix ever touched.
Hindsight is 2020. But you have to remember the era. 2009, 2010. The Korean media landscape was very different. They were making certain kinds of romantic comedies, certain kinds of historical dramas. This didn't fit any of those molds.
So it was just too weird for them.
Too weird, too dark. But there was also a structural problem, a format issue. Originally, Hwang conceived Squid Game as a feature film.
Oh, wow. I can't even imagine cramming all of that character development into 2 hours. It'd be impossible.
And that was the problem. The pacing just didn't work. Think about Gi-hun's relationship with the old man, Il-nam, or the slow, agonizing reveal of Sang-woo's betrayal.
You'd lose all of it.
You'd lose all the tragedy. If you compress that into a 2-hour movie, it just becomes a slasher flick, a series of gory games. You lose the human heart of it.
So the move to a series format, a 9-episode season, that's what allowed the story to breathe.
It was essential. It let us spend time with the characters, understand their debts, their families, their desperation. It made us care before it started killing them.
So he shelved it.
Yeah.
But he didn't just sit around and wait for the world to change, did he?
No, and this is the real lesson for any creatives listening. He didn't wait. He pivoted. He went out and became a very, very successful film director in the interim.
He built a resume. He built leverage.
Exactly. He directed Silenced in 2011, which was this huge, socially impactful film in Korea about abuse at a school for the deaf. It literally led to legislative change.
Plus, he was already a major player.
A major player. Then he directed Miss Granny in 2014, a massive comedy hit, and The Fortress in 2017, a critically acclaimed historical epic. These were not small indie films. These were blockbusters.
So by the time he walks back in the door to pitch Squid Game again, he's not some unknown guy with a weird, grotesque script.
He's a heavyweight. He's one of the country's most respected directors. And crucially, the landscape had changed. Netflix had entered the Korean market, and they were hungry. They were looking for content that broke the mold of the typical K-drama. They wanted something that would travel globally.
And this was it.
This was it. And when they picked it up, they didn't ask him to water it down. This is the key. The very things that scared the local studios a decade earlier, the violence, the grim tone, the complexity, Netflix saw those as assets.
They pink-lighted the flaws.
Pink-lighted, I love that. It captures the aesthetic perfectly. They gave him the creative freedom and the budget to make the show he always wanted to make.
Okay, so we've established the struggle to get it made, the decade of rejection. But I want to dig into the content now. Because you mentioned earlier that there is blood in the DNA of this show. And I think for a lot of Western viewers, myself included initially, we watch it as this kind of abstract dystopian fantasy. Feels like the Hunger Games or Battle Royale.
Sure, those are the easy comparisons.
But for a Korean audience, This hits differently, doesn't it? This isn't just fantasy.
No, it's history. It's lived trauma. And this is where we really need to pay attention if we want to understand the show's power. Let's look at the protagonist, Sung Gi-hoon, player 456.
Right.
His backstory is not random. The show tells us he's a laid-off auto worker from a company called Dragon Motors.
And Dragon Motors is a direct reference to a real company.
A direct one. Sangyong in Korean means double dragon. The Sangyong motor strike of 2009 is a pivotal, open wound in modern South Korean labor history.
Tell us about that strike, because in the show, Gi-hoon has these traumatic flashbacks.
Yeah.
We see riot police, we see violence. That actually happened.
It absolutely happened. In 2009, Sangyong, which was in financial trouble, laid off about 2,600 workers. It was a massive cut.
And the workers responded.
They responded by occupying the factory. They didn't just pick it outside. They took over the plant. They held it for 77 days.
77 days. That's a massive siege.
It was a war zone. The response from the company and the state was completely militaristic. We're talking thousands of riot police, special commandos, tasers, rubber bullets.
The show even hints at something with helicopters.
That was real. They used police helicopters flying low over the factory to create these artificial windstorms, trying to disorient the strikers. They used them to drop a liquid form of tear gas onto the workers below.
Artificial windstorms. That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, not a labor dispute.
It was brutal, brutal reality. And the aftermath was just as devastating as the violence itself. The striking workers were blacklisted, they couldn't get jobs, they faced financial ruin, mountains of debt from lawsuits filed by the company.
And the human cost.
In the years following the strike, it's estimated that over 30 people, the workers themselves and their family members, died. Many by suicide, others from stress-induced illnesses like heart attacks and strokes.
Oh my God. So when we see Gi-hoon in the show, completely broken, drowning in debt, unable to pull his life together, gambling away his mother's money, he isn't just a generic loser.
No. He represents a specific generation of discarded industrial workers, people who followed the rules, who worked hard at one company their whole lives, and then were thrown away overnight.
It's about the precarity of modern life.
Exactly. The show isn't just about a fictional game. It's about the ordinary middle-class person who is one layoff, one bad breakaway from falling to the absolute bottom of the economic ladder.
And that's what makes it so universal. You don't have to know the specific Sangyong story to feel that deep, primal fear of losing everything.
You don't. But knowing it, wow, it just adds this profound layer of grief and political anger to Gi-hoon's character.
It really does. And the historical parallels, they don't stop there, do they? We have to talk about the tracksuits.
The green tracksuits.
So iconic. I think half of World War I for Halloween in 2021.
They became a global symbol overnight. But there's a horrifying historical reference there, too. The entire aesthetic of the facility, the rows of bunk beds, the tracksuits, the numbers instead of names, it draws direct parallels to a place called the Brothers' Home.
I remember reading a bit about this. This was back in the 80s, right? Before the Olympics.
Yes, leading up to the 1988 Seoul Olympics. The military dictatorship at the time wanted to clean up the streets, to project this image of a modern, prosperous, orderly nation to the world.
And cleaning up meant what exactly?
It meant rounding people up. They established these so-called welfare facilities. The biggest and most notorious was the Brothers' Home in Busan.
And who did they put in there?
Officially, they called them vagrants, but that label was applied so loosely it was meaningless. Homeless people, yes, but also disabled people, orphans, political dissidents, even just people who were caught out after curfew without their ID cards.
So anyone deemed undesirable.
Anyone. They were rounded up by police, thrown onto trucks, and sent to this facility. And the conditions inside were horrific.
What was it like?
Inmates were forced to wear these simple tracksuits, often blue. Their heads were shaved. They were stripped of their names and referred to only by a number.
The parallels are
Yeah.
chillingly exact.
They are. There was forced labor, constant beatings, torture, rape. There are verified reports of bodies being sold on the black market to medical schools or just buried in the woods behind the facility. It was a slave camp.
It sounds like a concentration camp.
It essentially was a state-sanctioned concentration camp. And so when you watch Squid Game, with that context in mind, this isolated place where people are stripped of their identity, numbered, uniformed, and then disposed of when they're no longer useful, it's a direct visual echo of that national trauma.
It's a metaphorical concentration camp for the undesirables of modern capitalism.
Precisely. It connects the fiction directly to the reality of the Habesian world that Hwang said he observed. He looked at the debt crisis in Korea, where household debt is over 100% of GDP, one of the highest in the world, and he saw a society where people are forced to be wolves to one another just to survive.
It completely redefines how you watch the show. It's not just cool violence or a thrilling game.
It's remembered violence.
Yeah.
It's history repeating itself as a televised nightmare.
Which brings us to how they built this nightmare visually. Because the violence, as you said, is wrapped in this very specific, very strange aesthetic.
The candy-colored nightmare, yes. The art director, Chae Kung-sun, she's an absolute genius.
She didn't want it to look gritty.
No, she specifically rejected the look of a dark, grimy dungeon like you'd see in Saw or Hostel. She wanted a clash. She wanted to mix the profound innocence of childhood with the absolute brutality of death.
Let's talk about the staircase. That impossible maze of pastel pinks and greens and yellows. It's probably the most recognizable set piece in the entire show.
It's incredible, and it's a direct visual nod to the artist M.C. Escher, specifically his 1953 lithograph, Relativity.
Right, the one with the stairs going in every possible direction, completely defying gravity.
That's the one. And the goal was to create that same psychological effect. Spatial anxiety, disorientation. The players never know exactly where they are. They can't map the space. They don't know what's up or what's down.
It makes them feel lost and powerless.
Exactly. But there's also another architectural reference there to the Spanish architect Ricardo Bofill's La Muralla Roja.
I've seen pictures of that. It's that vibrant, fortress-like apartment complex on the coast of Spain.
That's it. The color blocking, the maze-like quality, it's lifted straight from there. But in the show, it serves a very specific psychological purpose. It's all about infantilization.
Infantilization. Explain that.
Think about the scale of everything in the game arenas. The playgrounds are oversized. The red light, green light doll is gigantic. The piggy bank full of cash is hanging impossibly high in the air.
Right, it makes the adult players look like small children in comparison.
Exactly. When you put an adult in a physical space that is scaled for a giant or painted in the colors of a nursery, it makes them feel small. It makes them feel helpless. It subconsciously regresses them.
So you're saying it's a deliberate strategy to make them more obedient.
Right. It references Pryageshan developmental models. If you treat adults like children and you put them in a child's environment, they are far more likely to become compliant. They start looking for an authority figure to tell them what to do.
That is deeply diabolical. So the red light, green light robot doll isn't just scary because it has sniper rifles in its eyes. It's scary because it taps into this primal fear of being a toddler getting caught breaking the rules by a teacher.
Exactly. And the doll itself was modeled on illustrations from old Korean school textbooks. It's designed to trigger those deep-seated childhood memories of authority and compliance.
And the colors play into this too. You have this stark visual clash. The fuchsia pink of the guards versus the bluish green of the players' tracksuits.
Total color opposition. It immediately establishes a visual hierarchy of power, and the dormitory design reinforces that.
I read somewhere that the dorm was designed to look like a warehouse or even a supermarket.
Yes, a brutalist box. The art director talked about wanting it to feel like a warehouse store like Costco. The bunk beds are stacked high like products on a shelf. The idea is to visually treat people like objects, dehumanizing them from the very beginning.
And then you contrast that with the waiting lounge, that stark white, almost alien room with the Zaha Hadid-esque curves.
That room always freaked me out. It felt like a void, like a clean room before a surgery.
It's meant to be dreamlike and sterile. A complete disconnect from reality before the horror begins. It's an aesthetic palate cleanser that creates this deep sense of unease.
And for the art history nerds out there, the show is just packed with these little visual Easter eggs.
Give us a few. I love this stuff.
Okay, so the final feast scene, the three finalists sitting at that big triangular table.
Yeah.
That's a direct reference to Judy Chicago's famous feminist art installation, The Dinner Party.
Away, really.
Absolutely. And more obviously, the distorted faces of the players during the first game are meant to evoke Edvard Munch's The Scream.
I can see that. Total anguish.
The fake painted skies in some of the game arenas are a nod to the surrealist painter René Magritte, specifically his The Empire of Light series, which depicts day and night at the same time.
Creating that sense of unreality.
Exactly. And then, of course, you have the VIPs, their opulent lounge, the gilded animal masks. That's a direct visual reference to the Rothschild Surrealist Ball from 1972.
Okay, that makes so much sense. The bizarre, grotesque surrealism of the wealthy elite watching the poor destroy themselves for sport.
It's visual storytelling at its absolute finest. Every color, every prop, every artistic reference is telling you something about power, class, and dehumanization.
And speaking of power, we have to talk about the sound, because I feel like the audio in Squid Game is just as manipulative, if not more so, than the visuals.
Oh, absolutely. The composer, jung-jae, who, by the way, also did the incredible Oscar-winning score for Parasite, he is a master of creating anxiety with music.
He really is.
Where?
And he used such unconventional instruments for a thriller. I mean, recorders, castanets. It's not your typical scary movie score.
It goes right back to that central theme of corrupted innocence. These are instruments you play in elementary school. They're supposed to be simple and happy.
I definitely played a recorder very poorly in third grade. I think we all did.
Exactly. And there's a fantastic story about the main theme way back then. You know that simple, haunting recorder melody that kind of loops throughout the show?
Yeah, it's iconic. It gets stuck in your head.
So Jung Jae is not a professional recorder player. He was just messing around with one in the studio. And when he was recording that main melody, he accidentally played a D sharp instead of a D. It squeaked. It was a wrong note.
And they kept it in.
They kept it. Because that squeak, that little imperfection, was perfect. It captured exactly what they wanted. It sounded like a grade school recital gone horribly wrong. It sounded vulnerable, human, and slightly broken.
That is a happy accident if I've ever heard one. A perfect mistake.
It really is. And then there's the use of rhythm, the clapping.
The 3-3-7 rhythm.
Right. Now, if you grew up in Korea, that rhythm is visceral. It's deeply embedded in the culture. It's used in school sports days, at rallies. It's a cheer of encouragement. It's the sound of "Go Team Go."
But in the show, it's a death march. It signals the start of another game.
He completely subverts it. He twists a community cheer of encouragement into a cold, menacing soundtrack for murder. It's incredibly effective.
And then, layered on top of all that, he juxtaposes it with famous classical music. Haydn's Trumpet Concerto as a wake-up call. Strauss's The Blue Danube Waltz for mealtime.
It's a classic cinematic technique, but it's used so well here. It turns the horror into a mundane routine. It makes the mass murder feel bureaucratic, scheduled, even elegant.
High culture masking high barbarism.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. It's so deeply unsettling. The music just settles into your bones and makes your skin crawl.
Okay, so let's move on from the intentional artistic choices to the completely unintentional chaos this show caused in the real world. Because when you have a hit this big, this global, things are bound to break.
The law of unintended consequences rears its head.
And nothing exemplifies that more than the phone number incident. This story stresses me out just thinking about it.
It's an absolute nightmare scenario for everyone involved. So in the first episode, Gihan gets that business card with the circle, triangle, square, and a phone number on the back.
Right. And usually in movies and TV, you use a fake number.
Yeah.
Like the 555 prefix in America.
Exactly. The production team thought they were being safe. They used an 8-digit number, thinking it wasn't a real connectable number.
But they made a critical error.
A huge one. They didn't realize that in South Korea, the mobile phone system is smarter than they anticipated. If you dial an 8-digit number, it automatically adds the 010 prefix, which is the standard mobile prefix, and connects the call.
So they effectively published a real person's private cell phone number to hundreds of millions of people around the globe.
Yes, the number belonged to a woman named Kim Gil-young. She's a businesswoman in the town of Songju. She had absolutely no connection to the show.
And suddenly her phone just starts blowing up.
Blowing up is a massive understatement. She was getting over 4,000 calls and texts a day.
4,000 a day.
People calling at 3 a.m., pranksters asking if they could join the game. Her battery was draining constantly because the phone would not stop ringing and vibrating. It was torture.
That is horrifying. And the worst part is she relied on that number for her actual business, right?
Yeah. She did. Her clients had known that number for years. She couldn't just turn it off or change it without destroying her livelihood. So when Netflix and the production company initially reached out, they offered her compensation.
How much did they offer?
Initially, the first offer was for about 5 million won. That's roughly $4,200.
That seems insultingly low for essentially ruining someone's life and business.
She refused it, of course. The situation became a huge news story in Korea. Eventually, Netflix had to go back and digitally edit the scenes to remove the number from the show. But the damage was done. It's a terrifying example of how the barrier between the screen and our reality is now tissue thin.
And speaking of those barriers breaking, we started the show talking about the squad versus squid confusion. But the cultural contagion went so much further than that.
Oh, it was a firestorm.
Let's talk about the Vans, the white slip-on shoes worn by the players.
The company saw an almost 8,000% increase in sales of white slip-on bands.
8,000%. That is the insane power of a viral aesthetic.
It's unbelievable. It's marketing you could never, ever plan for.
And you had Saturday Night Live doing that brilliant country song parody with Rami Malek and Pete Davidson.
Which was hilarious, but also incredibly pointed. It took the core anxiety of the show crippling debt and translated it perfectly into a relatable American context. It showed the theme was universal.
But there was a much darker side to the contagion, too. Especially when it came to kids. Schools were freaking out.
Yeah, there were reports from all over the world. The UK, Belgium, the US kids on playgrounds reenacting the games. And because they couldn't actually, shoot the losers of red light, green light, they were just beating them up.
That's incredibly disturbing.
It is. It speaks to how easily media violence can be mimicked by children who lack the context to understand it. But it also highlights a very sharp critique that some scholars made at the time. They called it the cosmopolitan consumption of poverty.
What does that mean exactly?
It means that many Western audiences were consuming this exotic narrative of Korean poverty purely as entertainment. They were buying the tracksuits, making the dalgona candy, wearing the masks for Halloween, while completely missing the specific deep cultural trauma like the Sanyang strike or the Brothers' Home that birthed the story in the first place.
So we turned their national suffering into a costume party.
In a way, yeah. That is a tough pill to swallow. We became the VIPs, essentially, watching from a safe distance, entertained by the struggle.
We are the VIPs.
Yeah.
Okay, let's pivot to the mechanics of making the show. Because one thing that really stood out to me in the research is how incredibly real the physical struggle was on set. This wasn't all CGI and green screens.
No. Hwang dong-hyuk is a very practical director. He wanted realistic, visceral reactions from his actors. Take the tug-of-war scene.
Which looks absolutely exhausting just to watch on TV.
It was exhausting to film. They weren't just acting like they were pulling on a rope. For many of the shots, they were attached to a high-tension pulley system, a literal machine that was actually pulling against them with immense force.
The sweat, the shaking hands, the grunts of exertion.
Real. That was genuine physical exhaustion. They were literally in a battle with a machine.
Unbelievable. And the glass bridge. Please tell me they weren't actually hundreds of feet up in the air.
They weren't hundreds of feet up, no. But they were about 1.5 meters off the ground. About 5 feet.
That's still high enough to seriously twist an ankle or break a bone if you fall badly?
It's high enough to trigger a very real fear response. Your body knows that's a dangerous fall. And they were actually jumping between real glass panels. Some were tempered glass, some were normal glass that was safely rigged. But the physical sensation of jumping on glass over a drop, that fear you see in their eyes, that hesitation.
That's genuine.
It's absolutely genuine. It's interesting to compare that to the reality show they did later, Squid Game. The challenge. In the reality show, for legal and safety reasons, they couldn't use real glass for the bridge. It was too dangerous for non-stunt performer contestants. So when people fell, it was a VFX shot.
So the actors in the drama actually had a more physically dangerous set than the contestants on the reality show.
Isn't that wild? The fiction was more real than the reality.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I love the detail about how they got the sound for the dalgona game.
Oh, the gunshot.
Yeah. The sudden crack that makes them all flinch when the time is up.
So usually you'd add a sound effect like a gunshot in post-production. But the director, he wanted the actors to flinch for real every single time. He wanted that authentic, startled reaction.
So what did he do?
He would sit off camera with a megaphone, and at random intervals during the take, he would just scream, "Bang!" at the top of his lungs.
Lass. You just scream bang at his actors.
It worked. It kept them completely on edge. It kept the tension sky high because they never knew when it was coming.
I love that. So we're having this conversation in 2026. We've seen the whole trilogy now. Let's talk about the story's complete arc.
Sure.
Season 2 dropped in December 2024. Gi-hun, with his red hair, returned.
And the tone shifted dramatically. Season 1 was about survival. Season 2 was about revenge.
He wasn't a scared participant anymore.
No, he was a disruptor. He was actively trying to take down the organization from the inside. He was a revolutionary.
And we got the introduction of Chil-soo,
the male doll robot, Young-hee's terrifying boyfriend from the red light, green light game.
Which was a great, creepy addition. And then we have the finale, Season 3, which was released in June of 2025, Hwang made the very deliberate decision to end it there.
Which I respect so much.
Me too.
Yeah,
He didn't want to drag it out for 10 seasons like The Walking Dead. Tell the story and get out.
exactly. And the theme of that final season was really about trying to preserve one's humanity in an inhuman system. We finally got the full backstory of the front man, In-ho. We saw the deep connection between his choices and the choices Gi-hoon was facing.
And the whole concept of functional anarchy came to the forefront.
Yes. The final realization that the game only ends when you stop playing. It's not about winning the money. It's about opting out of the brutal competitive system entirely.
Which brings us, I think, to the big philosophical question to wrap this all up. We started this conversation by talking about how we, the audience, are like the VIPs.
And I think that's the final provocative thought we should leave the listener with. The show forces us to occupy that uncomfortable position. We are sitting on our comfortable couches watching desperate people suffer and die for our entertainment.
So, are we the villains of the story?
In a way, the show suggests that we are complicit. It holds up a mirror. But it also, in that final season, offers a potential solution. You mentioned functional anarchy.
Right.
Experts describe that as a community where individual freedom is the standard, where you don't harm others, and crucially, where you can always opt out. That is the fundamental antithesis of the Squid Game.
The Squid Game forces you to play. You can't leave. Functional anarchy is built on the principle that you can always leave.
Exactly. The game relies on our compliance. It relies on us agreeing to the rules of a brutal zero-sum game. If we stop playing, if we as a society refuse to commodify people, if we refuse to accept crushing debt as a death sentence, the game collapses.
So what does this all mean at the end of the day? It means Squid Game wasn't just a thriller. It wasn't just a pop culture moment.
It was a history lesson painted in fuchsia and green. It was a global warning shot.
And hopefully a lesson we don't have to learn the hard way.
We can hope.
Well, on that cheery note, thank you for joining us on this journey through the archives. It's been a wild and honestly pretty heavy ride.
It's always a pleasure to dig this deep.
To everyone listening, check your search terms. Don't sign any waivers without reading the fine print. And we will see you in the next one.
Stay safe out there.